Let's be honest, you're treating strength training like a nice to do. Then you hit the pool 5 times a week, blast interval sets on the turbo, and run on legs that are hanging by a thread. Here's the truth. If you want to race long term, perform at your best and avoid that one injury that derails your season, strength training isn't optional, it's essential. And I've seen it time and time again. One of my athletes, George, before we added proper strength work, couldn't hold his aero position beyond 45 minutes without pain. After just 10 weeks of structured gym work, he wasn't just stronger, he was faster. He was holding power longer and then running off the bike without his quads screaming. That's what smart strength work does. It builds resilience, not just muscle. But here's the catch. Most triathletes are doing it completely wrong. They're either lifting like bodybuilders, burning energy, not recovering. That should go towards swim, bike and run, or skipping it entirely because they don't want to bulk up and it's also the first session to drop. Both those approaches are killing your progress. Men and women should lift. Women do worry and are concerned that they're going to put on too much muscle. Wrong again, it's impossible. In this video, I'll break down exactly why strength work matters, how to fit it around endurance training, and the key exercises every triathlete should be doing, whether you're chasing your first 70.3 or a Kona qualification. And make sure you stay till the end, because I'm going to show you the one simple progression that most pros use, but almost no age groupers get right. It's the missing piece between strong training and strong racing. Why do triathletes skip strength training? The most common I hear is, I don't want to bulk up. Or another one is, I don't want sore legs, or I get sore legs, DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, which I don't want to affect my bike training when I do intervals, or the same on the run. Did you know 70 to 80% of age group triathletes will experience an overuse injury in a single season? Potentially because they have a short-term mindset rather than this long-term athletic development. So think about that for a second. So here we have the science. What does strength actually do for endurance? You've heard this term thrown around a bit. It improves your running economy. That's the gold ticket. What is the energy cost, the currency, to run at a specific speed or pace? Okay. Neuromuscular efficiency. We all want to be efficient and move very well. And fatigue resistance, the most important thing, certainly in a marathon, at the back end of an Ironman, or even a 70.3, fatigue resistance. One of the key areas. Okay, it helps maintain your posture. Think about it. Your head alone weighs 10% of your body weight. Okay, if your posture is 2 to 3 centimeters off, so your head is 2 to 3 centimeters forward due to a thoracic curve, imagine the shift in center of gravity. Okay, it helps maintain your output on the long rides. You need the muscular strength to create torque, to push on the pedals. Yes, you get that from specific training on your bike, of course, going up hills, but we need the muscle in the first place to have the capacity to handle the load. Here's a great one, and it's the most important one of today's video, because we're not trying to bodybuild. We reduce the injury risk for up to 25% for most triathletes. Up to 25%, okay, because it balances your load and the tolerance in the tissues. If you've ever had Achilles problems, I know a lot of you can go, it's a terrible place to get lower calf, foot injury. We want to balance the load across the tissues. Okay, so you wouldn't build a house on a really weak foundation. In some countries they do, but it doesn't end very well. Okay, so you wouldn't want to build, so why do you want to build your fitness on a weak chassis? Okay, so I don't need to sell it any more than that. The research doesn't lie, and evidence across the board with top ultra, top Ironman athletes, male and female. It's essential. I really want to try and get you to implement this into your training, and this is the best way I'm going to explain it to you. And it's the method how to fit this into the Triathletes week. This is super important for you, I know, watching this, because action is key. I really want to try and help you. And if you follow me on my board here, I've broken it into some simple progressions, which is really important to understand because we all start at a different point in the cycle of strength training. Okay, so stick with me. I'm going to start on what to focus, movement patterns, adding in core stability, and then these 3 areas here. Okay, and remember, in the beginning I said to wait till the end because I'm going to show you what professionals are doing really well for long-term athletic performance, which age groupers aren't nailing. Okay. Bear in mind, I have a history and a background in strength training rehab. I'm actually still registered with the governing body here called SIMSA, and although I don't practice it every single day, I work closely with some strength people because I tie it all together. Now, let's break down these big compound movements. We've got push, your pull, your squat, and your deadlift and lunge. These are the movements you do pretty much every day, okay? I'm sure you'll agree with me. Let's start kneeling, for example. Let's take a press up, for example. If you can't do a full body press up, we can do it kneeling. Anyone can do that, whether you're 75 or 20. So kneeling press up, you then progress into full body, and then you start adding some weights. Now that could be dumbbells or a barbell bench. You could also add some instability as a Swiss ball. Okay, so you can see that's a nice progression. Same with pull. So you've got your push movements, your pull movements. It's really important to get scapular control. We spend a lot of time in our forward position over the bike and desk bound as I'm sitting now. So we would start with a simple band and we would move into a row. Now that row could be a machine based, it could be a TRX row, it could be a barbell row. You get my point. We then move into assisted pull-ups. Now I wouldn't go straight into trying to do pull-ups, wide gripped pull-ups in a supinated position. I would start with a really thick elastic band and do some assisted pull-ups where you build up the strength, okay? And then you work into full body weight. Pull as I've written, pull-ups as I've written here on the board. Okay, so you're still with me. Now we've got those two main areas. Push and pull is going to obviously help your shoulder stability, your lats, which are big, strong muscles, your chest, which are going to help your swimming and your upper body mobility. All right, now we're moving into biking and running. Really critical for lumbar support, your squat patterns. Now you'll see a lot of people doing back squats, and I've done them in the past. Unless you're very good, very, very good, most good strength coaches actually keep back squats away from triathletes. I know Miranda Carfrae's ex-Kona world champion, her strength coach in the US in Boulder stays away from back squats. There's very few athletes that can do a very good back squat without going into super lordosis in the lumbar spine. So more on that in a second. If you've never squatted properly and you're 60 plus, like one of my age group triathletes, Jeff, it took me years to get him to do some strength training because he was worried about his back. It took some disc fusion surgery from a previous cycling accident years before that, 20 years before I met him, to realize the importance of getting into a squat and a deadlift pattern. Okay, now he is super religious on doing that, and could be a ball against your low back, so a Swiss ball against a wall, literally up and down, getting the squat movement patterns, taking the instability away, making you very stable. We then move that to obviously body weight, because we do that every day. So sit to stand, put a bench, a box behind your body, and you sink down, so you slowly lower and you come back up. So that's your body weight. You then move to potentially holding 1 or 2 kettlebells. 1 will offset you, 2 will make you more neutral. And then of course you would move into a front squat, ideally with kettlebells, and then progress that to a barbell. And the progression from a traditional front squat would then be into power development, so squat jumps, okay, which is more of a plyometric exercise, which is advanced. Deadlift, you would start a simple pattern movement teaching, so shoving the knee up against a bench to lock the shin, because what people aren't doing is, and I see it in the gym, is, and here's an example of one of my athletes, they are squatting down instead of hinging backwards with their body weight through the hip joint, okay? So you've got to hinge, which means you've got to stick the bum backwards, all right? That's how you get a really good posterior chain, the glute, hamstring, and low back. You start with that first, getting the movement pattern with body weight, literally bending at your hips, lowering forward and standing up. You add then a hex bar, you take the bench away, you start with a hex bar, is probably better for the lack of ankle stability and flexibility of a triathlete, a runner. It's a little bit higher off the ground as well, and remember, we are not trying to do bodybuilding movements, we want to develop a really good hinge. So deadlift is a hinge pattern all around that glute complex. And then you want to progress that and add in something very functional, which is one-legged RDLs. So of course you start that with body weight, you progress to a light dumbbell or a kettlebell, and then that becomes movement based as well. More about that in a second. So the lunge, as you can see here on my diagram, we would start with, for example, one leg forward, one leg back. That's a lunge, so split lunge. And you would hold a pole in your arm with your hand. So you to create stability, and you go up and down, ascend, descend, holding pole, then you move that away. That's your stability taken away. You can do an elevated split lunge, so your front leg elevated or your back leg elevated. They both do different things. One will be more quad dominant recruiting, and one will be more glute, so hip extension recruitment, which is ultimately what we want. We want to get that back leg up so your hips get into extension, so behind your heel, behind your bum. And then we would then add some weights to that. As long as you're stacking yourself up, so your upper body on top of your rib cage, on top of your hip socket, instead of, you'll see people leaning forward in a lunge and their hip joint, they just don't have the flexibility through the front of their thigh, and their hip joint slamming through the front of the socket, and that's not good. And we want to get that breathing right. So you need to be able to breathe diaphragmatically so the belly fills up, then the top third fills up last. And to do that, you need to stack all the segments: shoulder, rib cage, hip joint, ankle joint, okay? Lastly, if you advanced enough, you would do split lunge jumps. That's really advanced, explosive, and of course, you powering up and lowering down in your eccentric phase. Okay, so that's the big compound movements. You've heard the word core stability thrown around all the time. Physios like to use it, and we all have core stability. It's the smaller muscles, for example, the transverse abdominals that sit below your six-pack muscles, your rectus abdominis. They all just switch off. If your rectus, your big six-pack muscles, want to do all the work, fantastic, but they will fatigue really quick, okay? It's the small guys that you really need. So if I just took 3 areas of core stability: side planks, rotation control, and single leg balance. Think back to that athlete I mentioned in the beginning of the video, and lack of core stability on a bike, which means he's recruiting his lumbar spine so much, his erector spine, and they just fatigue. They're not very good postural muscles. It was lack of oblique strength. He didn't have very good rotation control, so the stability muscles around his abdominals, which includes your TVAs and your obliques, internal, external. And there was also a glute max issue on the one side, so his hip was then starting to rotate. Okay, so we can all get into some sort of side plank position no matter what your age or ability. We can't go straight onto full body, so we would start with your kneeling on the elbow and knees down, kneeling on the mat, and then we would hold that for a specific point of time. You might start with just a few repetitions up and down, and then you'd progress to an isometric hold, etc. Then you'd progress to full body, as you can see, and then we would actually take that top leg off. And the reason why we do that is to really promote your adductor strength and your glute med on the top leg. So you are requiring obliques to kick in, your outside glute muscle and your adductor muscle at the same time. Physios love this if you can manage it. Okay, rotation control, really important for running. Thoracic mobility in the water as well. So you would start kneeling, holding a band out in front of you. You can do that isometrically, or rotation fires up your internal and external obliques. You then progress that to standing, okay? And once you mastered that, because you're fixed in two feet position, you then get into a real functional split stance, which is running. One leg forward, one leg back. You can split the set. You do rotation work. You can do holds, pail-off prests, etc. And then you get a lighter weight and a lighter band, and you do that on one leg, which is pretty brutal, and that obviously really trains your body to bring in balance, stability, and strength. One of the big areas on core stability is how good you are on one leg. So remember, running is all on one leg, and that's where we want to have, I mentioned in the beginning, form resistance, fatigue. Okay, so first we would just start on simple one leg balancing, where you took your other leg off. You might do it while you're brushing your teeth. You might add some neck rotations. You might even close your eyes. Okay, so you brush your teeth twice a day, I hope. And I've got a friend in South Africa that only brushes his teeth in the morning. Poor partner. And you then progress that to star excursions. Okay, it's a real complex movement pattern which will challenge the best athletes by standing one leg, and that's your stance leg, and the other leg moves in a format of star pattern and back, and you'll do that repeatedly until your glute is screaming at you on the standing leg. Okay, we would then, every runner needs to, if you're returning back to play from injury, you need to be able to do a hop and stick on one leg. So hop, jump, and stick it, and not just basically fall over all over the show. Progression of sort of 6 to 8 of those. And then you would build that into bounding, where you hop and stick, but more of a bound, and that's through your big toe. I hope you can find a place where you can start on that ladder instead of going out, do a lunge. Well, where am I doing a lunge? Are you 75 and you have really poor balance and lack of stability? Are you 40 and you've never done gym work? Or are you 25 and you come from a gym background and, you know, why would you want to do a body weight squat? You just laugh at me. Okay, so I hope that gives you a nice context of where to start focusing on. You'll see here I've got type as my final point: isometric, eccentric, and concentric. And before I get into that, just remember, if you want to watch something else of mine, a great video on why triathletes are stuck at 2 minutes per 100. Click on this little video in the corner and you will be amazed what you learn from that. Okay, back to this. So if you're doing those compound movements, you need to think about your type of movements that you're doing. You've got an isometric hold, eccentric, which is probably one of the hardest, and then concentric. So isometric hold would just be, for example, back to that bull squat, you would just go down and hold into a squat position for a period of time, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Now you can do that lunging, you can do that in a plank position, a press up position. You see what I'm getting? You get a huge recruitment without the forces of jumping or concentric up and down in the knee. So if you're coming back from injury, start with the isometric, then move on to eccentric. It's the hardest one. For example, if you're lowering down a dumbbell, that is the eccentric movement. This is concentric, the fast up. We're better off being, as runners, moving down in a eccentric pattern, slowly, 3, 4, 5 second tempo in a front squat, and then moving upwards in a concentric really quickly, because that's the force load that we have to deal with in running. Think about that. And remember, I haven't forgotten, at the end of this video, I will tell you the 3 movements that professional athletes do really well and age groupers miss out. Remember, if you don't do strength training, you're leaving your performance right out on the table. Your competitors are going to do better than you, and it's complementary. Don't see it as an extra hassle or addition. If you're trying to complete your first 70.3 or even go to Kona, this is the missing link, and we're heading into winter now in the Northern Hemisphere. Start now. Okay, so here's a brief explanation around periodization and how it changes in season. I would probably structure it like this. Pre-season, you'll do heavier loads. It's 5 to 7 reps. So it's a fewer rep range. It's your foundation strength, okay? So you do 4 to 5 sets of that, for example, of those hinge patterns. It's much longer to recover between sets, 2 to 3 minutes, but you can superset that with an abdominal exercise, or I like to do a compound low body movement with, for example, a row. Your race season, you're obviously into maintenance, you're not trying to make gains, but if you lack activation, the posterior chain, your glute complex will just switch off. This is when you start picking up those calf niggles because you think you're on top of it. And how many of you stop it and then it'll come 3-4 weeks later and you go, including myself, you kick yourself because you've neglected the small basic single leg calf raises or your split lunges, for example, just to keep the glutes working. So you lower the weight, you take the load off because your race specific intensity goes up on the bike and the run. It's a higher speed of movement because you are now adding plyos in or jumps, downs, where you need some faster movement, which is greater carryover to your sport. Of course, everything's really quick with running and cycling. You don't want super slow body bulking, bodybuilding movements because we don't do that. Sport, and it's a negative return if you go so super heavy because you then just develop this very powerful muscle without a speed of contraction. So use mini circuits for time efficiency. That's where a lot of the high rock stuff comes in now. I'm not saying do high rocks training, although it's really good, obviously run and endurance. That's another video. But if you only have 20 minutes, I'd rather you do 20 minutes of some really good movements with some jumps and abdominal works and hinging. For example, it'll implement everything and it's 20 minutes. And it's quite fun. All right, remember the strength supports, not replaces your endurance training. So it always needs to be an additional support session. Okay, now a case study is always quite nice for all of us to relate to. Here we have Dan, 36 years old. You might have seen him in some of my previous videos on the Kona Dream Project, starting from scratch. He has never really done proper strength training routine. He had completed 4 Ironmans before we started. He's now gone from 12.5 hours to 9:46. He would suffer for quad cramping and basically back fatigue. And now he's 8 months into a sub 10-hour Ironman with lots of room to grow. It's a 3-year project. Okay, we didn't add more hours. The hours weren't crazy. in a week at all, 11, 12, 13 hours, but we had really specific structure. Strength, recovery, and mobility every 2 or 3 days for sustainable progress. So what did we do? First, the full assessment needs to be crucially done. Breathing patterns. Is the posture really affecting how you recruit the movement pattern, which then affects the breathing? So most triathletes, runners breathe just really poorly. So we've mentioned diaphragmatic breathing in the belly, getting the quadrants right, so then you can sit up properly and execute a movement, a push, a pull, a hinge, a squat. Spent the first 3 months kind of mainly doing home workouts where there was minimal equipment needed, but maximal game of repetition. So almost like your physio exercises, but enough to load and really get recruitment. They included always abdominals, included a push and a pull, and a basic bend and lunge pattern, which then translated straight away into the next phase of 3 months later, where we added more load, of course, because the movement patterns were better. Always started with the movement pattern. We started with isometric holds, eccentric, for example, a pull-up isometric hold. We then started with lowering down in a pull-up, so step up on a bench, lower down slowly on a pull-up, and then move to concentric in that 3-month phase. And the last 2 months we just maintained, because we were building to an Ironman and the training volume shifted up, a lot more biking and intervals. We didn't want the body to be super tired. It was just mobility went up, foam rolling, multi-directional torso, thoracic mobility because the swim and the posture. So we started the posture, and then it was just about maintaining activation. Actually, you could see his leg strength not grow, because endurance, you'll just never really get that maximum growth. He actually started to look like an athlete, as in that you could actually see the quad muscle. He always had fairly developed calves from running before we met. And yeah, naturally there was a little bit of leanness happened in the upper body because he was just swimming more, and that's also diet related. But we managed to maintain weight, which is great. If anything, put on a little bit of muscle, which is really hard for endurance athletes when you're already only about 71, 72 kilos, 160 pounds. You can't afford to lose weight. So that is one part of the journey, but now we head towards winter and it'll start the cycle again. Here's an example as well. Myself, it's life-changing. You neglect it in your 30s, and I was racing Ironmans, and I would dabble in and out of strength, but I just gave it no attention. Early into my 40s, still racing, still having some of my best Ironman performances, time went down, availability, training got smarter, but I realized I had to really implement a lot more single leg basic exercises to keep things activated, because I started getting tight calves to a point where the mobility got restricted, and then you just pull up in a fairly quality type session. So that happened at least twice a year. The implementation of regular consistent strength training has completely evolved me, and it's actually when you're feeling pretty low in energy from a hormone boost, I'd always feel better from the human growth hormone response when I left the gym. So if you're leaving the gym absolutely floored, you're doing the wrong workout. That is a key take home. Just pause there. If you're walking out of the gym in pieces, that is the wrong workout for you. Okay. Also great, I started implementing more sauna work afterwards, because you're there already, and that is got huge gains, cardiovascular health, blood plasma changes, brain dementia, and various other documented, well-researched areas. Okay. Now, you have to be structured in this, otherwise you're just lifting bicep curls and not doing anything really specific for your body. And I've highlighted this, so let me go through the summary of strength training, what to focus on. And remember, I mentioned something about professional athletes. This is exactly what they're doing really, really well. They will do these patterns like we all are. They start for the first 8 weeks on isometric contraction. This will be in the off season. They move through the off season into eccentric work of all those patterns. I can tell you now, I've seen them do it. They might just do it with a little bit more finesse and a little bit more regular 4 or 5 times a week, and then they'll stick to concentric movements. If you nail those 3 type of loading patterns or force production, you will become a well-rounded triathlete. I guarantee you. Once you've implemented, come back to the video, drop some comments in the message below. I respond to all of them. It might just take me a little bit longer to get in touch with you, but I will promise you, you will get stronger. Okay, you'll be able to lift better weights and translate that to your running and push a better gear for longer on the bike, which is ultimately our goal. In the water, it's just about shoulder injury prevention and a little bit better recruitment of the stabilizer or rotator cuff muscles. There you have it, some real easy steps you can start implementing straight away. Look at some of my other strength training videos if you want a bit more detail on what exercises to do, but you've got to start somewhere. And remember, I give you the framework to start at the entry level, whether you have never done this before or if you have a history of time in the gym. If you want to watch some of my other videos, there's a great one around the best and worst 70.3 workouts to do. It's quite a banger, you'll enjoy that. If you're a triathlete over 30, in-season strength training might be the smartest investment you implement into your training routine straight away. And if you want some more help, click on the link in the description below for a proper structured plan, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.